If you bury pain, you bury it alive.
Mm-hmm.
It'll always come back to get you in some form or fashion. That is being a man. That's courage. All this other stuff about denying it, pretending it didn't happen, it was so long ago, it doesn't matter anymore. That's being a coward. And that's not manly. We need to redefine what masculinity really looks like.
Welcome back to the Men Talking Podcast. Glad that you're with us. I'm Dana Jorgensen. It's Dr. Ken Baugh with me. He's the brains of the operation, let's be honest. And today we're going to dive in just a little bit, talk about something that's a little bit harder. We're trying to tap into and talk about things that men aren't really comfortable talking about, to be honest with you. It's one of those places where, let's be honest, as guys, we just talking sometimes just not our strong suit. We'll talk about sports, we'll talk about other things, but today we'd love to dive into vulnerability. What does that look like? Why is vulnerability so hard? And truthfully, I kind of wonder if men listening to this even know what that really means.
Well, and why does it even matter?
Yeah.
Right? Because, vulnerability gives the impression of you're setting yourself up to get creamed. So why do I want to do that?
Yeah, why would I set myself up to get hurt? Why would I open myself up when I play sports, when I do all the other things, right? You protect yourself. Like, that's part of life. Why in the world would I get into a relationship with other people and open that door whatsoever?
Right.
It's an interesting time. So we're going to talk a little bit today about that. I'd like to start off maybe just a little bit, Ken, with some sort of definitions of, like, when we're talking about vulnerability and then we're talking about transparency. What's the difference, though? Because I could be transparent. What's the difference between that?
Yeah, you can be transparent without being vulnerable, but
Yep.
you can't be vulnerable without being transparent. So the way that I see it, transparency is when you tell somebody your story. This is what happened to me. This is, it's kind of the facts of the story. Vulnerability takes that to the next level. And now you're sharing how you felt about that, how it actually affected you. The losses, the sadness, the hurt, the anger. Those are the things that put yourself out there to be potentially rejected, which I think is one of the great fears around being vulnerable, is that you put yourself out there and people are going to reject you. They're not going to like who you are. They're going to think you're too much. They're going to judge you, criticize you, abandon you. And because we're made in the relational image of God, those are core fears for all of us because they challenge the dynamic of relationship that we were created for.
Okay, so let's make sure we get some terminology right as we go through this morning. So we're talking about vulnerability, transparency. Let's grab another word that's right around there, intimacy. What is the difference between transparency, vulnerability, and intimacy now? Because we're going to grab another one here because we're about to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say that there is no intimacy without vulnerability. That vulnerability is the doorway to intimacy, because implied in vulnerability is that you're being true to who you are. You're being real about what bothers you, about what's going on inside your own heart. And again, that sets you up potentially to get hurt. So intimacy is the longing to be known. And again, God wired that into us because he's a relational being. He wired into our DNA this longing to be known and to be loved for what is known. And so that can't happen unless you're willing to be vulnerable and tell people who you are, what's going on inside of you, what matters to you, what hurts, what doesn't, those things.
So, and let's be clear, intimacy and being intimate with our wife, in other words, sex, is not the same thing.
No.
We're
not talking sexual intimacy. I will say, though,
it's different.
That the vulnerability that we're talking about leads to and cultivates the, I was going to say the opportunity for sexual intimacy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I really think it's what our wives are longing for. They're longing to know us, and we're resistant to divulging that.
And intimacy, have I heard you say it? It's like if you pull it apart, into me, see?
Yeah, and Chip Dodd says that a lot as well.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew that's where I'd heard it from
Yeah, but I
somewhere.
think that captures the essence of it.
Yes.
Is that I am allowing you to see into me.
Yep.
And that's risky.
Yep.
Because you may not like what you see. And I may be concerned that, you know, it's just not going to be enough.
Yeah. So let's break this up a little bit. I've seen this diagram before. I don't know who did it, but if we take 4 quadrants to talk about this morning and really put it together, if we break up our 4 quadrants and being accepted at the top, not accepted at the bottom, on the left side is not known and on the right side is known, and we'll try and put a graphic up for those that are watching. When we are accepted, but we're not known, okay, this is where we get into musicians, athletes, people that need to keep up image management, right? So they don't really know me, but they do accept me.
Pastors,
and this
musicians.
is where musicians, this is where it gets real tiring because you're exhausted because you have to keep up a persona, right? A different face.
Yeah, you have to manage that image, and that takes energy. And again, what is it that's driving that image? It's fear. It's fear that if you really know the real me, then you're going to reject me or you're not going to like me. And so anything that's driven by fear is going to have an outcome that's probably not super healthy.
Okay, so bottom left quadrant is when you're not known and you're not accepted, isolation, right? So men are really good at this. We have every opportunity to isolate ourselves from other people, physically, spiritually, emotionally, you name it, right? I mean, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, and
for
I
guys
think the
to do.
assumption is if I hide those parts of me that I don't want you to see, that those parts will be safe.
Yeah.
And where there is some truth to that, they're safe from being hurt by somebody else. But again, God created us for relationships. So anything that is alive cannot survive or thrive in isolation. You put a flower under a box, it's going to die.
Yep.
In a similar way, if you take a part of you and you hide it away in a silo, that part of you is going to die and rot and get toxic. And then that's going to leak into other dynamics of your life.
Yep.
If you bury pain, you bury it alive.
Mm-hmm.
It'll always come back to get you in some form or fashion.
So if we keep moving around, on the bottom right of our quadrant then would be you are known and not accepted, which I would say is most people's core fear.
Yep.
Probably everybody has this fear,
Sure.
but which is rejection, right? So that's the box of rejection, when somebody knows us and they finally know us for who we really are and they reject us. Core fear for sure. And we move our way around up to the top right, and this is the one healthy of the 4 quadrants, which is I'm accepted and I'm known, which gives us leads to intimacy or connection.
Yeah, and I think when you think about our relationship with God, He knows everything about us. He created us. He knows us from the inside out, and yet He still loves us. And I think that is one of the hardest things for us to internalize, truly the unconditional love of God. My experience, and this is true of both, businessmen, pastors, whomever it is, that allowing God to love us is really a difficult thing to do because we don't feel worthy of it. And the truth is, I was a pastor for almost 30 years and I'd hear that all the time. And I would say to people, well, duh, of course you're not worthy of, how could anybody be worthy of being loved by God? God loves us not because we're worthy. God loves us because He is love. Mm-hmm. It's His character. And He placed value on us. When Jesus went to the cross, that shows how much He values us. And so our love is essentially a result of, or our value is essentially a result of His love for us.
So let's drop in to this a little bit more now. We've talked a little bit about these 4 quadrants, and let's drop into this word of vulnerability. And it's like, and guys, maybe you're holding out or you're like, this is really ridiculous, but just hang tight with us for a minute here. So vulnerability, why is this so hard for men? And let's start at childhood. Let's start from being a kid, but why are we so conditioned to make this so hard? Because the result and the gift of being vulnerable is unbelievable. It's astronomical, but we are so resistant to it. Why?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to being a kid, because I think that's where we start learning some of these survival behaviors. Let's say you're out playing and you get hurt, and whenever we're hurt, we seek comfort. That's true regardless how old you are.
Yeah.
But as a little boy who's out and getting hurt, whether he's made fun of by the kids, he falls off his bike, whatever, he's going to run into the house looking for comfort. And if he doesn't receive the comfort he's looking for again and again and again, right? If that comfort is not available to him, then he's going to decide, well, that's never going to be there for me. So, and he doesn't do this. He doesn't have the capacity cognitively to do this, but it's just like he just kind of takes that need and puts it in a vault and locks it. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that he can actually develop contempt for his need. That gets dark real fast. Because now when I have a need, which God gave us these needs, so it's not optional whether you have them or not.
When you say contempt, do you also mean shame for that need, or is that different?
It's different.
Okay.
Contempt, think of contempt. I use the word contempt on purpose. It's this word that it's stronger than hate. It includes disgust. It's this idea of pathetic that I absolutely despise, that I need comfort. And so I'm going to shut that down in myself, but then I'm also going to take it out on you. Because if you come to me as a friend or as a spouse, your wife comes to you and is looking for comfort, needing comfort. If you have contempt for your own need for comfort, you're not going to be able to give her what she needs. And that's going to be true of your kids, your grandkids, whomever. That whatever you shut down inside of you is going to be shut down in relationship with other people as well as in your relationship with God. You can't create a filter that filters all the stuff you don't want out and leave all the stuff you do want in so that I can have a different quality of relationship with God interpersonally than I can with another human being. Those two things work together. The book of James talks about that. You can't say you love God and hate your brother. That just doesn't work.
Right.
And so all of those dynamics makes vulnerability really, honestly, scary. It's a learned defense mechanism to survive our need for comfort. And that is God-given.
What I've heard you say it before. It's like the 4 S's or something: seen, soothe.
Yeah, so Dan Siegel's a neuroscientist, and he sums this up. Kurt Thompson is a Christian psychiatrist. He talks a lot about this as well. We need to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure. And those are from womb to tomb.
Yep.
So you don't outgrow that. You don't become so much of a man that you don't need those things. You need them. You can suppress them. You can deny them. You can pretend they're not there, but they're there.
Okay. So understanding that, what happens when we avoid the vulnerability to us?
Well, a number of things. One is it's going to take a lot of energy for you to shut that off. Think about it like, you've got your hand on a closet door, and that there's so much stuff in that closet, so many skeletons in it, and they're pushing that to open, and it takes more energy for you to hold it closed. So you're using all of this emotional and physical energy to hold that down that you could be using in other relationships, in other things.
So would you say it does it spiritually as well?
Yes. So spiritually as well, if you have a broken capacity to be vulnerable, are you gonna go to God when you're in need?
Yeah.
Right? Are you gonna trust that He's not going to throw a lightning bolt at you or take something out on you? So it also affects us, we are talking about this, but just even interpersonally in our relationships with others. If you're broken in your capacity to be vulnerable, you're not going to tolerate it from anybody else. You're going to shut it down, and that's going to hinder that relationship.
It's so interesting because we always use vulnerability as this idea of like the capacity to be relationally connected to other people, but I think it works for ourselves too. Like, can we really be honest with ourselves?
Right.
Like I would say almost that's harder than being honest with other people. Like, can I actually be honest with myself? Yeah, you know what? I shouldn't have done that. You know what? That did hurt. Like
or I do have needs. I do have longings. I do have dreams and desires and hopes, right? That's being honest with yourself. I do have fears. I do have limitations. I'm a human being.
How tragic to think of that, though, where it's like, I do have hopes and dreams and all those things that we kind of dream of as a kid. And yeah, I know most of them don't come true. Yeah, whatever. You want to be an astronaut, but you can't do math really well, or but I get it. Yeah, those things happen. But it's like just being honest with ourselves about those things. That right there is really hard.
Well, and if those things are not affirmed, then we're not going to be honest with them. Like if you go to your dad and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut. Oh, you're terrible at math, or that, we don't do astronauts in this family, or whatever it is, right? If that gets rejected or shamed, you're just going to turn that off. But kids have this unbelievable capacity to continue to hope. We have to die to that as we grow older. And, I'm 61 years old. And in fact, Chip and I were talking about this the other day, where I have this capacity to not have hope. Because if I allow myself to have hope, then I can be disappointed. So I kind of hedge it, right? I kind of just keep this even keel. Don't get too excited. Don't get too down. We're going to run the gamut here so that when the bottom does fall out, then I won't be disappointed, or I won't get hurt.
You think you're protected.
Yes, but what you're doing is you're completely taking away the capacity in the moment to actually enjoy what is in front of you. So it is not close to what Jesus has made available to us, and that he referred to as life to the full.
And let's talk about that. I mean, God's design. What is that? Invulnerable, like what it looks like. I mean, I know, Genesis 2, not good for man, to be alone, right?
I like to say that God created us to live raw and real. And raw meaning put it all out there, right? I mean, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. I think that was both literal as well as figurative, right? Is that there was nothing to hide. Before sin came into the picture, there was no fear, there was no shame, toxic shame. There was none of this. And then sin comes in the picture, which I think is a direct rejection of vulnerability and limitations. Think about it this way. I was actually teaching on this not long ago. When Satan tempts Eve, he tempts her with the fact that you don't know the difference between good and evil. God's holding out on you. God's the only one that knows that. So Eve, if you want to be like him, then you need to know the difference. And so the only thing in all the garden that God didn't want Adam and Eve to know was evil. All they knew before the fall was good. And so now Satan tempts Eve to believe that God is holding out on her. She eats of the fruit. Her eyes now are open, so now she sees both good and evil. Adam takes of the fruit as well. So now we have an entirely new arc to the story. But it was all because Eve was unwilling to be content with her limitations, to not know what God knows. And so one of the hardest lessons, I think, for us to learn, I think this is true for men, not exclusively, but I think really true for men, is to learn how to embrace our limitations. I can't do everything. I'm not good at everything. I need other people. And I think as we get older, this is true for me, you just start having physical limitations that no matter what you do, you can't change, right? I mean, there's stuff now that I can't lift, and I called my son-in-law over, who's 6'5" and former military, strong guy. He can do anything. Well, it's like, yeah, I used to be like that too, but I can't anymore. So I'll just give him a call and say, hey, Peter, can you come over and do this? Or, and he's always happy to do it. But I still feel a little bit of shame in saying, I can't do that. I need help.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's two things within that, right? So number one is like fake it till you make it, or at least you have what it takes, you have what it takes, which is what, truthfully, I'm trying to instill in my boys, right? I'm like, man, you've got what it takes to go get it. You've got what it takes. And then all of a sudden you realize.
But that's different, Dana.
But someday you don't have what it takes to go get it.
And then that's okay.
Yeah.
But there's a difference in encouraging somebody, you have what it takes, then you can do anything you want.
Okay. That's a good point. Yeah.
So, because you can't do anything you want. You have limitations. You have certain gifts and talents and abilities, and so that's why if we can help our children and grandchildren to find their lane and then learn how to be content in that lane and maximize what God did give them, I really think that's an act of worship.
Hmm.
That we are actually recognizing this is how God created me, and it's good. And I'm okay that I can't sing like you do. I'm okay that I can't hit a hockey puck like Mike can, right? Or but I can enjoy that. I can cheer you on. I can be grateful for what you've got. And then you lean on me in other ways. And so that's how the body of Christ is put together, right? Paul talks about that not everybody has all the gifts because we all need each other. God created it to be that way.
Yep.
And yet we fight it and resist it. And then we have this cultural dynamic that, you don't need anybody. You're strong. You're self-sufficient. You can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's all a mirage.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about the quadrants that we talked about at the beginning and the different things that come into those unhealthy boxes in our lives, and where in the isolation, how, we talk about shame thrives in isolation.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like, well, I just have the own thing going in my head in the same cycle over and over and over, and I have no one else that's going to tell me.
Well, and that
anything.
secrecy, shame, toxic shame. I make a distinction between those two things.
Yeah.
Healthy shame is embracing our limitations.
Yeah.
Toxic shame is there's something defective and wrong with me. And toxic shame goes after your very nature, your very character, is that you shouldn't even exist. You're using up natural resources that somebody else better than you, can utilize. And so toxic shame is terribly destructive. And yet it gets planted, the seeds of toxic shame get planted very early on when we don't get what we need as children. And the truth is, no matter how great your parents were, you didn't get everything you needed. And we don't need to blame our parents or throw them under the bus or, I have my problems because I had bad potty training. That's not what I'm talking about. There's a difference between naming and blaming. Naming something is actually living in the truth. It's living in the light, right? Those are all kingdom values.
Yep.
Blaming doesn't do anything. Wherever there is blame, shame is close by. Because blame is the need to, I can't internalize my own limitations and weaknesses. And so now I'm going to blame them on you. So it's an incapacity to actually metabolize my own humanity and my own limitations.
So let's talk about some biblical examples then of what vulnerability looks like. Like for guys that are listening, they're like, well, give me some examples. So let's start with a few people in the Bible and talk just through a little bit of what their vulnerability looked like, whether we have David or whoever. I mean, who?
Yeah, I think David's a great example. We see that over and over again through the Psalms.
Yeah.
He's crying out to God. He's lamenting. There's a whole book in the Old Testament called Lamentations, which is all about grief and loss and processing that, being honest about what hurts. Even God, throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Exodus, the wilderness wanderings, much of the prophets were helping the Israelites to recognize you have a special relationship with God. You are his chosen people. You are a kingdom of priests that have been set apart to represent God to a watching world. And God refers to his relationship with the Israelites over and over again in the Old Testament as a marriage, and their idolatry as adultery. So here we have God even modeling this vulnerability, sharing his own hurts that God can actually hurt because he's a living being. Everything that we have capacity to experience is because we're creating his image and likeness, right? Jesus took on flesh and dwelt among us. He had everything, all the limitations that we do except for sin. But he chose, Paul talks about this in Philippians 2, where Jesus poured himself out. He emptied himself, not of his deity. He was still God, but he chose, and somehow, I don't know how the hypostatic union all plays out, right? But he chose to live in his limitation and not cheat with his deity to get through the tough parts of his humanity.
So I get it. It's not like fun party talk that we're talking about here. Like this is really hard stuff and it's not easy. But what's the fear of it's very few churches you're ever going to walk into that want to talk about this stuff. Yet it's all woven throughout the Bible, but we don't do it. We don't want to have these conversations. It's always, go get it, and God wants your best, and and it's like, yeah, except for, let's be real, there's people that are walking through the mud, and the Bible has so many examples of that. Even Job. Like, Job was very vulnerable, right?
Well, look at Abraham and Sarah, right? I mean, God promises that they're going to have a child, and it's 20 plus years later. And so it's like, okay, God, are you going to make good on your promise? And then Abraham gets impatient and goes and sleeps with Hagar. And now we have a conflict between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. And it's still true to this day.
Holy cow. Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting to me, kind of as we walk through just some of these people in the Bible and some of their lamenting and some of their struggles, and we see that vulnerability. But talk a little bit more about the intimacy side of what the vulnerability leads to with intimacy, and how does that look like, and maybe practically for guys, like, because guys, I'm sure they're like, well, I want to have sex with my wife, and I want to be intimate with my wife, and and she's like, well, I don't talk to her, and what does that look like for guys? What help guys see, what does intimacy leading to vulnerability look like?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or maybe the other way around, vulnerability leading to intimacy,
I think it's kind of this daily practice. So like when you come home from work, your wife asks you how your day was. What's our typical response? It's fine.
It was good.
It's all right. Because you don't really want to rehash your day, because you just don't. You'd like to just kind of check out. But maybe to take a few minutes to kind of talk through a couple of things. My boss was really in a bad mood today, and God, he said some things that really hurt my feelings. Now you're like going, oh, okay, it's suck it up, dude. Come on, don't be such a wuss. But that's what I'm talking about, is that we have this gear that kicks in whenever we start getting vulnerable and start actually paying attention to our emotions, that just wants to shut them down. That's not what men do. You just push through it, rub some dirt on it, get back out there, and, tomorrow's a better day. Well, yeah, let's hope tomorrow will be a better day, but let's not minimize the fact that we experience some pain that we don't need to stuff, that we need a safe place to go and actually share it, where it can be seen and validated and talked through. Most guys just don't do that because it takes energy. At the end of the day, you're tired. You don't want to rehash stuff. And I'm not saying you got to do this for an hour. I'm just saying take 10, 15 minutes. Identify an emotion that you had and share that with your wife.
Yeah, allow her to feel connected to your day.
Yeah.
And to you. Yeah.
That's why I think, Chip Dodd's work and those 8 core emotions is so helpful, because it gives us language for what's actually going on in our heart. Even because most guys say, what are you feeling? They're like, I don't know. We know how to feel anger, and we know how to feel some semblance of joy, some semblance of happiness, right? But anything in between is like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. So when you look at these 8 core emotions that Chip talks about in his book, The Voice of the Heart, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, shame, loneliness, hurt, and gladness, then it gives you some language now to identify, what am I feeling? Am I feeling lonely? Was I feeling sad? Was I feeling hurt? Was I feeling angry? And that gives you the capacity now to share with somebody else, hopefully your spouse, or another guy friend, that you can trust. That vulnerability creates connection. And when it's repeated, it creates a stronger and stronger and stronger bond of trust, of me believing that, hey, when the bottom falls out of my life, I can come to you because you've come to me on things, and I'm learning to trust that dynamic and that relationship. That creates a close friendship that's reciprocal.
Well, let's dive into that just a little bit. So it's interesting. I would venture out to say that, we can share these things with our wives, and then let's go down a different road of, I don't know that our wives were created for everything about us. And so I think it's extremely important and extremely life-giving that we have other men that we are able to show vulnerability to. I think it's taken me 35, 40 years of my life to be able to finally find men in my life that aren't afraid of that are kind of doing the same work. You know, we did that book, Voices of the Heart, as a group of a couple different guys, and it sort of gave us language and freedom to look at each other and go, man, that was real hard. I didn't do that well. Or just talk through different things. You know, when I was coming home from a hunting trip 2 years ago, I got in the plane, and it's funny when you spend time, which we are very aware of this, and you do it in Montana, and we're working on building the same thing here in Tennessee right now. But it's like when you get that time out in nature and it's quiet a lot for long periods of time. I was in Alberta elk hunting, and it was real quiet for 7 days. And it's interesting how God's voice just kind of gets a little louder, and it gets a little louder and a little louder. And then all of a sudden you're like, what in the world? I got on the plane to come home, and it was real clear. God was like, hey, Dana, I want you to apologize for how you treated Julie when you had miscarriages.
Wow.
And specifically, I remember one time driving, and Julie was tearing up, and I was like, what's wrong? She's like, well, today would have been the birthday of one of our babies that we lost. And I was like, oh, you're still mad about that? You're still sad? And I can look at that now and go, man, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But back then, I was trying to protect myself from the emotion and going,
Exactly.
oh, no,
Yes.
no, I'm going to keep you over there, and I'm going to stay over here, and I'm just going to be like, no, and play that off. But instead, I was a jerk, and I held her back, and I was like, no, I'm not. And God was like, no, you're going to go apologize about that. And the next weekend, I was with some buddies doing something, and a close friend of mine, and I said to him, I was just like, man, I got the wildest story to tell you. I said, and I'm kind of like pushing it off. I feel like God wants me to apologize for like something from 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And my buddy was able to walk me through it and talk with me about it. And he was like, you know, I probably need to do the same thing because I did the exact same thing when my wife was in her greatest need. I shut her down. And so separately, we actually ended up going and apologizing to our wives. And, you know, it was hard. Julie probably spent a few days that came out of her. Like she grieved for a few more days, and she was kind of mad, and she had to work through her own emotions in it. But having another guy to be able to talk through and work through that vulnerability, most guys would just, dude, it was 8 years ago. Let it go. Blah, 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 whatever. But instead, God slowly but surely helped me mature in that to see my way and go, no, I want to go back, and I want to repair and restore what's broken.
Yeah, it's never too late to repair. That's true in marriage. It's true in parenting. It's never too late. So how did that go when you actually went to Julie and you apologized for that?
Yeah. So first of all, I was as nervous as I will get out. Like nervous because in that vulnerability of handing that over to her, I had to do the I'm sorry, and then let's take it another step. I'm sorry for, and then let's get to the vulnerability step.
Yeah.
Will you forgive me?
Yes.
And I released all my control of that situation, all my control of what I felt like I was controlling, my emotion and her emotion, and I put it on the table, and I let her take the reins, and now it was in her court to do with whatever. She could reject me. She could say, no, I'm mad, and I don't want to go back there, and I don't want to do that. Now, I'm thankful for a wife that has done a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, Julie's been through cancer 2 times. We've lost a few babies through miscarriage. Julie's done work, a lot of work. And so for me to go back to that, it wasn't an immediate, I forgive you. It was a thank you for saying that. And then she went and grieved for a day or two. And she grieved through that and worked through her pain of what I did and my ownership in it. And then she was able to come back to me and forgive me. But it took time. Yeah. But man, that level of vulnerability is heart racing, scary.
Yeah.
And oh, you're a man. You didn't need to do that. You don't have to go there. Why would you do that? It was 8 years ago. Why would you drag up the past? Why
Right.
would you? Well, I think that the good is it's almost like an equal and opposite reaction of how vulnerable we want to be is how far we can get to in the depth of our connection.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think those two things work together.
Yeah.
Pain doesn't have an expiration date on it.
No.
So something that happened 30 years ago, if God is prompting you to go repair and you have the capacity, that person's still alive, you can still do that. That is really important. And man, I tell you, I've seen relationships reconciled, like honestly, when one person just says, "You're right. I'm so sorry. I did that. I'm sorry it hurt you. That wasn't my intention, but I can see how it did. Will you forgive me?" That is being a man. That's courage. All this other stuff about denying it, pretending it didn't happen, it was so long ago, it doesn't matter anymore. That's being a coward. And that's not manly. We need to redefine what masculinity really looks like.
It's interesting. And the voices too of fear. It was so long ago, leave it alone, blah, blah, blah. Don't drag up the past. You're just going to hurt them more.
Right.
That's not true. That's a lie.
Well, it does hurt because, to your point, she had to go and grieve for a couple days. So, it's hurt that leads to healing.
Yeah.
If we allow ourselves to grieve, to feel the sadness, to feel the loss, to grieve the pain, we can't do that alone. You can't grieve alone, right? John Townsend told me years ago, he said, "Ken, if you grieve alone, you will always grieve." Grieving requires relationship, and it requires somebody else to see it. I think that's why God gave us tear ducts in the front of our eyes. That's why God gave us mirror neurons in our brain, so that when you're feeling something, that triggers that feeling in me, that if I'm truly allowing myself to connect in the moment with what you're going through, I'm starting to feel the sadness. And if I have anything similar in my story, then that's coming up. Well, if I don't want to deal with that, or if I'm shut off from that, you better believe I'm going to go to war on you to shut that down. And I see that happen a lot in marriages too. Marriages people have been married for decades, have all of this stored up pain and hurt that it's just poison. And it doesn't have to be that way. It just takes one person having enough courage to step into the light and to walk in the truth and say, "Hey, can we talk? When you said that, it really hurt." And for the other person to not go into some kind of shame fest where well, I didn't mean that, or, you're too sensitive, or, what's wrong with you? And to say, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Tell me about that." Right? You kind of lean into it. So relationships take a lot of effort and a lot of energy that I just think we tend to, especially as men, put the majority of that in our work. And so when we come home, we don't have much in the gas tank emotionally to give to anybody. And so maybe just going back to the practical aspect, maybe just being aware of leaving a little more emotional fuel in the tank so that I've got something to give to my wife and kids when I get home. Might not be a bad thing.
That invitation is there, and I can speak personally and just say, like, yeah, that's my story. That's my experience. I pushed it down, shoved it away, didn't want to do it, didn't want to be that guy, didn't want to act like that, didn't want to be vulnerable to my wife or to my friends especially. And then, you know what? Sometimes when the pain screams loud enough, the pain of letting it out is less than keeping it in.
Yeah.
And I think when we hit that threshold as guys, it's like there's that threshold of, I'm going to keep it down. I'm going to keep it down. Oh my gosh, it hurts so bad. I can't do it anymore. I just got to let it out.
Yeah, there's a tipping point.
There's a tipping point, and enough stuff happens. And if we want to fight the premise of it, truthfully, we're watching guys come unglued left, right, and center right now in our generation. Our generation is full of men that have never had more self-help books and all kinds of garbage to help us out. And the truth is just like guys are hurting. Guys are in so much pain and so much anguish and so much of that performance-based, if they knew me, they would reject me, but they love me. TV personalities, politicians, all these people, right? It just, and you can see it. We all know it. We all see through it. And the gut kind of goes, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And we got Williamson County, which is right where we live. I mean, Williamson County went through a period of 3 or 4 years where it was only men who committed suicide.
Really?
Yeah. And it's like, and all of those men were whatever, 25 to 50 years old. You know, what is that? Why? That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable. And vulnerability is one of the gateways to stopping that.
Yeah.
And it's not taught. We're talking about it, you know, guy to guy, we're talking about it. But this isn't something like, oh, the pastor needs to get up and preach on vulnerability. It's not it. This is a gift that guys give each other when you have the time, when we're fishing, when we're hunting, when we're hanging out, when we're playing golf, when we're whatever, sitting around a campfire, smoking cigars, whatever your thing is. There's the opportunity to lead in that way. Just a small thing. Dang, yeah, today was tough, you know, it was hard. And you know, maybe a little bit more and a little bit more. And if somebody around that group is healthy, they'll pick up on that and they'll go, yeah, me too.
Right.
Yeah, me too. But you have to lead there first. As a guy, you have to lead the way. No one else is going to teach it, and then you sit down and enact it. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and let's just be honest. There is risk involved in being vulnerable. The potential for you to get rejected and to be hurt is very real. But when you have access to these 8 core emotions, which is why God gave us emotion to begin with. He gave us emotion so that we can navigate the harsh realities of this life. So the goal isn't to hide yourself in a silo and protect yourself from getting hurt. That's just a slow, agonizing death. The goal is to let the force field down, allow the possibility of getting hurt. And you say, well, why would I do that? Well, because you have emotion in order to process the hurt. You have the capacity to feel sadness, to feel the hurt, to cry, to share that pain. And that's the process of working through hurts when they come. If you isolate instead of doing that, it's just a slow, agonizing death, and it's going to affect everything. Your relationship with God, with others, it's going to hinder your life radically. But if you have the courage to actually disrobe, if you will, and go out in the world, you will get hurt at times, but you can process it. You can live through that. That is not going to happen all the time. That's the lie. That if you are vulnerable, you will get hurt. That's a lie. Sometimes you'll get hurt, but more often than not, you won't. As a pastor for many years, I was pretty vulnerable from the pulpit pretty consistently, partly because that's just how I'm wired, but also because the value of me being able to share my story. Like I remember one of the first times I shared that when I was in my early 20s, the woman that I was living with had an abortion. The guy that's out in the congregation hearing my story, looking at me going, wow, if Pastor Ken can recover from that, if God still loves him, maybe he'll still love me. Maybe I can recover from that too. So this very fear of us being rejected hinders our capacity to really help other people heal.
Well, it's terrible. It's a terrible analogy, but one of the analogies that kind of hits me the hardest is like, there's no, and the church is really guilty of this, but the church is really good at shooting its wounded.
Yes, it is.
Holy moly. And it's like, or we could all realize we're all wounded and step up to the plate and admit our woundedness. I don't even know if that's a word.
Well, the reality is we are all wounded. If you have a belly button, you're wounded. You've been affected by sin. You are broken. You can deny it. You can pretend you're not. You can do all kinds of, but everybody knows because they're human too. It's like, why can't we all just like agree that we're all broken and wounded and needy human beings? Because that's what's true.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't, yeah. We're all needy. I think this is just, it's been great kind of understanding and getting a good conversation in a little bit about vulnerability. And we'll dive into it a little bit more and touch on it in the weeks to come. But guys, we just encourage you, take a chance, step out there, talk about it. Also, read the book Voices of the Heart by Chip Dodd. That is a game changer that kind of gives you the foundation that we're talking about into those 8 core emotions to start having those conversations. Maybe read it at the same time as your wife. That would be kind of cool. Yeah. Or grab a group of guys, grab 3 or 4 guys and read it together. Get together, read that book. It'll give you some incredible insight into giving verbiage to what's going on the inside. So we'll be back. This is the Men Talking Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Dana. That's Ken. We'll talk to you soon.